ஜாயின் பண்ணுங்க மேம். அப்படியே ஃபோக்கஸ்டா மாத்தி வச்சுக்கிறேன்.
ரம்யா, இன்னும் நிறைய பேர் பார்ட்டிசிபென்ட்ஸ் கொஞ்சம் ரிமைண்டர் கொடுங்க.
யா மேம். மேம் ஆடிபிளா மேம்? மேம் am I audible மேம்? Hello sir, good morning sir. Dr. Gautam sir, very good morning sir.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes sir, I'm hear you sir.
Okay, and the video, can you see me well?
Yes sir, I'm see your video sir.
Okay, all right. Just wanted to check if everything is working fine.
Yes sir, everything is working fine now sir. Sir, we will start within 2 minutes sir. Can we wait for 2 minutes sir?
Sure.
Okay sir, okay. Nikita ma'am, can you hear me, ma'am?
Yes, I can hear you clearly. No issues.
Okay, sir. Okay. Shall we start, sir?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. It's all up to you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you. We can start now, sir. Very good morning to all. On behalf of SNS College of Technology and Department of ECE, it's my pleasure to welcome you all. Thanks for joining with us. I am Mrs. Ramya, Assistant Professor at SNS College of Technology. I welcome respected Sir Dr. Gautam Chattopadhyay, Senior Scientist at NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Thank you, sir, for accepting my invitation. I welcome respected Madam Dr. K. Kalachelvi, Dean ECE. I welcome you, ma'am, and I welcome all my respected faculty members and my dear students and all my participants. Welcome you. Today, we are going to present international webinar on technological opportunities in the post-COVID world, a perspective of a NASA scientist, presented by Dr. Gautam Chattopadhyay, Senior Scientist at NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Now I call Dean Ma'am to facilitate this function.
Sir, good evening, sir, and good morning, all over here. Because there it is, your time is very late evening, and
Yes.
you are really coming for us. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation, sir. On behalf of SNS, I extend my warm welcome to our distinguished guest with illustrious career. And you're from California Institute of Technology, and you're doing the research there. And really, it's a pleasure to meet you, sir. I'm sure that such a renowned person will inspire and motivate our students to the hilt. Let us all explore the opportunities with our eminent guest who has graciously accepted our invitation. I welcome you, sir, and let us all have uh, actually a great treat from you, a knowledge treat. This is what I mean. And thank you, sir. So once again, once the college reopens, we may invite you once again for such sessions. You have to kind enough to accept that time also, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you very much. So,
Yes, sir.
good morning to you all. And again, it's kind of late night here. That shows that, we are in a connected world, that we can do this kind of thing. But first of all, I really want to thank Professor Ramaya and all of you for making time to listen to me and my experience and what we are doing and what will happen, because COVID-19 has affected everyone's life across the globe, and many of us are working from home. And if you had asked some people a few months ago, whether they have heard about Zoom or WebEx, they wouldn't have told you all this. But now most of us are so much dependent on this kind of technological platforms, and that has allowed us to actually communicate, because as a human being and all as a researcher, as a all academicians, what we need is the connectivity, because we need to connect, we need to talk to people, we need to discuss, we need to teach. So all these things are possible because of the technological developments and the innovations that has been happening all this time. So a little bit about myself. I grew up in India. I am from West Bengal. I grew up in outskirts of Kolkata. I studied my undergraduate in Calcutta University, Bengal Engineering College. That is the second oldest engineering college in India after Roorkee. And then after that, I actually worked a few years in TIFR, Tata Institute of Fundamental Research. I actually was involved in building a radio telescope, the GMRT, Giant Meter Wave Radio Telescope, a famous radio telescope in India. So I was involved, and then I came to US to do my master's and PhD. I did my PhD from California Institute of Technology. I was very lucky to get that opportunity because Cal is called known as Caltech. Caltech is a very small university, but it has big name. It has there are 42 Nobel laureates from this small 2,000 student university. So when I used to walk around and I used to see someone so some used to walk by me and he's a Nobel laureate. So it's kind of, I used to pinch myself. Electrical engineering has everyone can mute. So thank you. So when I was a graduate student, I was do electrical engineering, but I used to sit in the physics department, and my next door neighbor every winter used to be Stephen Hawking. So so I used to see him, I used to talk to him. So I had a lot of I had the fortune of interacting with a lot of great scientists. So what we do is now we build instruments for space. We you have all heard that recently we sent a rover to Mars, and it is going on its way to go to Mars, and it is called Perseverance rover, and also it has a helicopter. It's called the Ingenuity. So we actually develop those, we build those things in our lab here at NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory. That's what we do. And in terms of what is going to happen in the post-COVID world, innovation always is one of the main ingredients that actually take us forward. And that is going to happen because it has provided us a lot of opportunities as well. If you think, I know people are suffering across the globe, but at the same time, it gives us opportunity to do something new, to come up with new ideas. You will all know that in the post-COVID world, we'll have a lot of investments in medical, telemedicine, in the medical equipment. So people who are working in the EC department, so they will have, because for any equipment, for your communication, you need to do communication, you need to do data transfer, you need to develop the sensors. So that's what we do as, in the Department of ECE. So you all will have a lot of opportunities to contribute. And on top of that, the next generation of communication is coming up, like 5G, and beyond 5G, the 6G. I work in very high frequencies, terahertz frequencies, so that they are beyond 5G. So I think a lot of opportunities will be there in coming years. So use this time to think about what new development that one can do. That's what we are doing in NASA right now, because many of us are working from home. So it gave us the time to think about what is the next big thing that is going to happen. What can we do to actually make next generation of space instrument that we are developing? Can we know more about what is going around? So having said all this, so this kind of webinar works best when there is question and answer. So I'll open it up for questions. You can ask me any questions you want. Not that I know the answers. So, but we can actually interact and come to kind of a discussion. So with that, I open it up for you guys to ask questions.
Thank you, sir, for giving such a wonderful message. That what is your flow and what is that you're doing in your lab, and you're talking about this one. So my first question is, before others, they all had questions probably. My question is, how was your experience when you are interacting with the Nobel laureates, when you join there, or when you listen to their lectures, and how that motivates people? Because only less number of people in India, they are going there, and you have that because you have such a background, and you were studied in the oldest engineering college, and you also were there in Tata Institute of Fundamental Research. So your exposure is different because you have gone in during that period itself when people are really finding it difficult to go into US. You have gone there. So first, my congratulations for that and getting into and interacting with them. So how was your experience? Kindly share with us.
Thank you. It's a very good question because, when I came to US, that was in 1993, this kind of pre-internet days. So internet was just coming in. Only very few places in India, they still had kind of email address only, not any website or anything, because Firefox was not there still. So we had to write letters by hand. I know some young people right now, and they say, "What is that? What is letters?" So, but yes, we used to write letters, and that's how we used to communicate at that time. And when I came, but when you come to a great place like Caltech, and then we always have some kind of apprehension that am I what is called is am I good enough for this kind of place, right? So it's called imposter syndrome. So it is very much there in us. And I also had that. But what you will realize that people who know a lot, who have achieved a lot, they are very down to earth. And they make you feel that you are, one of them. And that's what I have actually learned, that when I talk to people, when I talk to students, when I have students, I have postdocs, but I never tell that they are working under me, because no one works under me. They're all working with me. Because when I'm interacting with a postdoctoral fellow, when I'm interacting with a student, we are colleagues, we are at par, because I have a same amount, I have a lot of things to learn from the student as the student is going to learn from me. So that is the mentality of the people who actually knows a lot. People who show off, there are people who show off, I know, everywhere, but they are not that, I have some reservations about them, because if you know a lot, what are you worried about then? So that's what I found, and I have been very lucky to find good advisors, and my team. What makes this NASA is one of the best places is that we have people from all over the world, and they're the best in the business. So we are really lucky that we get the best people who are coming from all over the world and coming and working with us. So I really had a great experience so far, and I enjoyed every moment of it. When I go to on Monday morning, I never feel that, oh, I'll have to go to work. I'm excited to go back to work.
So I'm asking about the first, when you interact with them, what was the area you have interacted, sir?
Yes.
Could you share?
So yeah, of course, in terms of work, see what I do, what NASA does is actually one of the big questions. We work on science. Basically, we are trying to answer big scientific questions. And in the process, to answer those scientific questions, we need to build some instruments. We need to do some measurements, right? And then build instrument. That's what we do. But overall big arcing thing is about science. So one of the things that drives NASA is to find out, are we alone in this universe? Is there life anywhere else outside our planet Earth? So that actually drives. We are sending this rover to Mars. That is one of the main objective of that, is to find out, is there life on Mars currently? Was there life at any point of time on Mars? And how can you actually do that? So you have to build instruments. That's the instrument that we build. So when I interact with people like Stephen Hawking, I talked about all these black holes and how this universe came about. What are the this Big Bang, when from the Big Bang that the universe started. How can we actually go back in time and see what happened there? Not time travel. I'm not talking about time travel. I'm talking about measuring the signal that's coming from outer space today, and what can you, by measuring them, what can you tell about what happened in the past? So those are the things. Those are very, in a way, very interesting but difficult as well, because you have to make the most sensitive instrument that ever been built. So that's what we do.
Okay, thank you, sir. And I give the session to others because I will pose more questions now. Others will not get opportunity to interact with you. But it's really, really nice to have an interaction. And Ramya, over to you. You start the proceedings, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am. Now, dear participants, you can ask your questions by raising your hands or unmute your mic and then ask your questions. Yes, dear participants. Or you can type your questions on chat box. So before that, I collect some questions from students.
Sure, you can go ahead and ask those, yes.
Sir. So first one is, what are the technologies will provide more opportunities in the post-COVID world?
Yes, so I actually started talking about this. One of the technology, as I said, communication will be one of the, has always been an important area, because can you imagine living your life, a day of your life without a smartphone? So we used to do that, but now it is so challenging. If actually one day, if someone takes your smartphone away, you'll be lost. So that shows that communication is one of the most important area of research. So post-COVID world, that will be there as well. But medicine, medical industry will have a really lot of opportunities in the post-COVID world, because you have seen that how a lot of countries, that include the United States and many other Western countries as well, they really struggled in terms of equipments like ventilators. Ventilators, these are equipment that you need a lot of different technologies like mechanical engineering, thermal engineering, electrical engineering, data processing and everything. So a team of everyone has to come together and then build this equipment. So not only the ventilators, many other kinds of equipment that will be needed for the post-COVID world, the PPE stuff. So medical industry will play a big role, in creating jobs. On top of that, and also the telemedicine that I was talking about. And beyond that, there will be all other kinds of, that we need, nothing stops. Okay, in COVID, we are, kind of, homebound, and we are not able to do a lot of things, but we still need to have our day-to-day life, get back to our day-to-day life. And for that, technologies are always needed. Manufacturing technology, manufacturing industries, and in electronic industries, and satellite communications, and in AI and machine learning. Those are all these different areas that will need a lot of investments and opportunities as well. Yes, can you hear me? Next question.
Sir, can you hear me, sir?
The next question. So I did. You can hear me, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Is it okay now, sir?
Yes, you can go ahead and ask the next question.
Yes, sir. Yeah. How to equip myself to get ready for job after COVID world?
How to get ready? Okay, so how to get yourself ready to be ready for the post-COVID world? I tell students all the time the simplest of things, that if you had asked someone who actually just entered engineering college about 3 or 4 years ago, that okay, so what should you study? And then if you had calculated everything, you have planned everything out, that okay, after I graduate, these are the most hot areas, so I'll be working on those, and let me prepare for that. So what happened that COVID has changed completely, right? So my suggestion to all of you is not to really think about 4 years down the line. You should always focus on basics, like whatever you are learning, whatever subject you have taken, ECE, you have taken communication, you have taken microwave engineering, you have taken digital signal processing, someone has taken VLSI. Study whatever you are studying, study it well. No, don't study for to get marks. Don't study to get for the exams, but study to understand the basics of that subject. If you do, you will find that you are much more marketable, in the sense that when you go for an interview, when they ask you a question, that the answer that you are going to give will be much more nuanced, because you have a good understanding of the basic materials, and that's what people look for. We are not looking for if someone knows all this, remember some of this stuff. It's not about that. Can you actually really understand from the first principle? If I give you a problem, can you actually start from the very fundamentals? And that's what we are looking for. So instead of really focusing on maybe I should study AI, I'm not saying you don't study AI. I'm not saying you don't study machine learning. However, if you actually understand what is the underlying subject matters behind it, that will help you. So more, instead of focusing more on all those different acronyms and those subject matters, focus on the basics. That will really help you in the long run.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, well said. Actually, we want our children to know that one has to study not for marks. One has to study to learn. So when they hear that, probably more concentration will be given on learning perspective.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. But we are design thinkers. We are working on design thinking aspect to solve projects and other things. Only some of the students, they were having such an opinion, and that probably will definitely change because of your interaction. Thank you, sir.
Sir, next question from Mr. M. Saravanan, sir. Tell about Chandrayaan-2, reason for failure, sir.
Okay, yeah, the Chandrayaan mission, ISRO has been doing really well. So all of us should be very proud, because ISRO did the Mangalyaan mission, and these in Chandrayaan. So it is not easy. If you think about it, space missions are not easy at all. So when you are sending something outside our gravitational field, so you'll have to first get out of our gravitational field, and then when it is actually approaching any other planetary bodies or moon, then the velocities are really high. 10,000 kilometer, 20,000 kilometer or 30,000 kilometer per hour they are traveling. And then when you have to actually go around moon, when you actually we call it insertion in the orbit of moon, that needs a lot of maneuvering, because you have to slow it down so that it doesn't really go by the moon, so that it has to be captured by the gravity of moon. So those are propulsion related and guidance related technology development. But at the same time, India also, ISRO did a lot of instrumentation development for in Chandrayaan-2 missions and Mangalyaan mission. Then there will be a Mangalyaan-2 as well. So all these are very exciting. But landing, you all know that for Chandrayaan-2, the lander did not land. It's not easy at all. to land something on another planetary body. So that we have a lot to learn from our failures. So I don't think that is a failure in its.
Yeah, sir. Thank you.
Building block, the stepping block to the next mission. That's where ISRO will be successful for sure.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. So we can go for next question from Darunya Sivakumar. Sir, can we expect a major climate change destruction this year, and how satellite imaging help us to predict the climate change?
I actually could not hear the question. You just got cut off a little bit. Can you repeat the question again?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'll repeat it. Can we expect a major climate change destruction this year, and how satellite image help us to predict the climate change? Sir, you can,
Ramya, your question is not really clear. In between, it is not really.
Yeah, it's breaking off.
There
I
is a
couldn't
network
understand.
problem.
yes,
Yeah, it was breaking off. I actually could not understand.
yes, sir. And
Yes,
we
sir.
can go for next question, sir. Sir, can you hear me, sir? Is it audible? Sir?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So what should I do to enter into NASA scientist?
Okay, that's a very good question. So if you are a student, and then one of the way to come to NASA is to study in the US. Now we won't be able to hire someone directly. Suppose you are in India and you are looking for a job, we won't be able to hire you directly from India. The reason is that how do I know? Because people are like, you are from Coimbatore, you want to come to NASA. Someone is Santiago, Chile, he also wants to come to NASA. So, and there are all these candidates. How do I know who is good, who is not good, who is actually fits in our requirement or not? So that is one of the big challenges that we have. So the best option to come to NASA is to come for studying in the United States. If you or you do your PhD somewhere in India and then apply for a postdoctoral fellow position in NASA, and then we actually get postdoctoral fellows at different centers of NASA, and they come from all over the world. So I have a lot of postdoctoral fellows from European countries, from Nepal. I have one currently. So people come from all over the world. So one of the best way to come to NASA is through that route for postdoctoral fellow. If you are not going to do PhD, then also you can come to NASA. One of the way you can do is if you come to US to do your masters. If you do your master, then you are already here in the US. You have done a degree from the US university, and then you can apply for a position at NASA. Because we take people from even if you don't have green card, even if you are not US citizen, still NASA actually is willing to hire you. So these are the two most best way to come and work or do research in NASA. That one is the postdoctoral fellow program. Another is actually study here in the US and then apply. Or if somehow you are here for some job and then apply to NASA, then we can actually call you for interview and we can see you, because our interviews are very different than in many other places, because we want to spend time with the candidate and see how the candidate works in a group, because it is about teamwork. Nowadays, problems are so complex that one person really cannot solve these things. You'll have to work in all different groups. Someone has to have a mechanical background, someone a thermal background, someone electrical engineering, someone computer science. So all these people have to come together and work together. So we want to see that kind of interaction, how you perform, what is your attitude. You have to have a good attitude because we are not looking at your numbers, what marks you got. That is not important. We want to find out, what is your basic understanding, how you work in a team, what is your attitude, what is your outlook in life. Those are much more important than a mark on your mark sheet. So you have to think in those ways. Okay.
Okay, sir. Sir, next question from Jayakita ma'am. How does NASA communicate with the spacecraft?
How does NASA
communicate with the spacecraft?
Okay. How does NASA? The question was, how does NASA communicate with the spacecraft?
Yes.
Very good question.
Yeah.
That is something called DSN. It's called Deep Space Network. So we have actually for Deep Space Network, there are three major centers, because if you think about it, because of our Earth is rotating, if we have antenna at only one place, we won't be able to communicate with our spacecraft all the time. So we have actually three big antennas, one in California called Goldstone, another one is in Madrid, Spain, the other one is in Australia. So they are actually almost, if you look at on the map, is about 60 degrees apart. So there is always 24 hours direct link to the spacecraft. That's what we need. And so we actually communicate with those. These are huge antennas. Some of them are 70 meters in diameter. And if you will be happy to know that when India sent Mangalyaan mission, NASA actually helped through the Deep Space Network to help communicate with the spacecraft as well. So we do that. So that's what we do. We have a dedicated communication network called Deep Space Network. But data rates are very small because we can send a high power signal because we are on the ground. But when the spacecraft is sending some information to us, we cannot really, the spacecraft cannot really send a lot of power, data, because they don't have a lot of power available there. So data rates are much less than your 4G network on your phone.
Thank you, sir. Next question is, how can technologies support global supply chain? How can technologies support global supply chain?
So that is a question that you know the answer yourself, because if you think about it, what is global supply chain? Global supply chain is in all different areas. What product you are talking about, right? Are you talking about smartphones? Think about it. If you think about manufacturing smartphones, so technologies are developing those. And then we are also creating, if you look at nowadays, Amazon and your Flipkart, those are the way to actually supply things to the households. So who created this? These are all massive infrastructure had to be put in place. Think about the complexity of software development. Think about that the technological hardware that was needed to do this. So any area you need technologies to put together the infrastructure. So of course the technologies will be needed to actually help the global supply chain.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. And next question is, how much will the world advance in 10 years in regards to the technology, and give examples, sir?
Okay, I wish I knew that, because then I'll be able to make a lot of money. So if I do that, to be honest, we don't know. What will happen 10 years down the line is very difficult to predict. Think about it. If someone had asked you in 2010 or maybe in 2000 where the world will be in 2020, it would have been very, very difficult to predict, where it will be. We can have some kind of sense, but it is extremely difficult to predict the future where things will change. Because if you look at currently, the technological developments are going exponentially. In early 1900s, when that technology was developing, at that time it was more or less linear development. Basically, as a function of time, if you plot, it was not really as exponential as you see today, because things are changing so fast. What was really trendy, what was the most advanced system yesterday, in a few months that actually changed. If you talk to people who are working in Qualcomm, Qualcomm makes a lot of chips for your smartphones. If you talk to them, they think that chips that they develop and they spend billions of dollars and developing something, and then they said we'll have to recover the money in 6 months to 1 year because within 6 months or 1 year it will become obsolete. That these companies also want that. They want you to buy new iPhone every year. So that's how it is changing. It is very fast changing. So it is very difficult to predict. But hopefully it will be in a better place. That's what we hope. But I won't be able to predict. If I could, I'll be a billionaire, which I'm not.
Thank you, sir. Next question from Swaminathan, sir. Is it possible to detect tsunami, soil erosion, disaster yearly using satellites for avoiding human loss? That means, can I repeat?
You have to repeat. Yeah, you have to repeat because something I could not hear.
Yes, sir. Is it possible to detect?
Ramya, sorry for interruption.
Yeah, ma'am.
Keep your mic near to your this one, or change your headphones so that people can hear, because it is not clear.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am. I will adjust it, ma'am.
Adjust பண்ணிக்கோங்க. Okay. Okay.
Sir, next question is it possible to detect tsunami, soil erosion, disaster yearly using satellites for avoiding human loss? From Swaminathan.
Okay. Now, I'll repeat the question. The question was, is it possible to use satellites to predict, the natural disasters and talking about tsunamis?
Yeah.
You all know that tsunami happens when there is an earthquake in an ocean, right? So that's when tsunami happens. Unfortunately, we still do not have technology to predict well in advance when there will be an earthquake happening. But what you can do is that when earthquake happens, if the earthquake is happening in the ocean and that is the epicenter is far off, then we have some time because once the earthquake happened, then we can predict using some sensors and knowing how large the earthquake was and using some modeling that what kind of tsunami are we going to expect. And then because we have a lot of nowadays put a lot of sensors for tsunami prediction, basically measuring the waves and what is the propagation of these earthquakes. Based on those, we'll be able to say, okay, that tsunami is coming, that whether it will be really severe or not, and so that people can evacuate. So we get a little bit of time. But if the earthquake happens on land area, that we actually we can predict only a few seconds perhaps or maybe minutes, but doesn't give us enough time to help people. In terms of your satellite, but we can actually do, NASA is working with ISRO for a project called NISAR. It's called NASA ISRO SAR. SAR is actually a kind of radar, instrument. So with that satellite, what we will be able to do is actually from space, we'll be able to see, like in a disaster happened in Nepal, when there was an earthquake and a lot of devastation happened. What NASA provided the imagery from space to guide the rescue people to go where they should go, where more damage has been done. So you can actually see those things. You can using the images, and also the satellite data will help. So that will help so that rescuers can go to a certain location where more people are trapped. So in that way, you can save life. Yes. So the answer to your question, the satellite actually does help in this kind of disaster mitigation.
Thank you, sir. I think meeting will be concluded within 5 minutes, sir. So we can conclude now, sir.
So okay, so again, so I think we are concluding it, right?
Yeah.
I didn't hear you. Yeah. Okay, so I want to thank you all for joining in. It had been a great pleasure. I'm really sorry that I could not meet you in person because speaking to a camera is not that much fun, to be honest. When I could have talked to you in face to face, that is so much better. But what can we do? We are stuck here. But I hope that in future we will be able to, when all these things are over, I'll be able to come and meet you all in person. I'm looking forward to that. And my, closing thoughts is that, particularly to the students, uh, we all run after a lot of things. We run after awards, we run after money, we run after all this, but at the end of the day, none of these things are important. So what I try to do, what my mother had told me, that, try to be a good human being. So that's the motto that I have. And I don't know whether I have been successful or not, but I am trying. So you all should think about it, that, try to be a good human being. And the students who are women students, the girl student who are listening in, I want to tell you all that, you never think that you are any less than boys or men, because you have the same capability, even more capabilities of contributing as an engineer, as a scientist. So we all should make sure that the playing field is level, so that we remove obstacles for your success. We'll have to actually work on that, and you all should believe that you can do whatever you want, and because you are no less than men. So that is very, very important message I want all of you to take. And thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for your presence.
Thank you for participating, sir. Really nice end quote you made, and you are saying that equality exists, and
Yes.
it is there in West Bengal already, and it is also there in if you take Indian states, West Bengal and Kerala, people are really taking about the equal rights, and they are talking about equality, and they are really going about it. And it is there in advanced countries, and hope that is really continuously existing here also. So it is there, sir, but some are not there. So that mindset slowly it is getting changed by education. Probably if they reform education in India, and they are really looking ahead, that is something good news in India. So if that happens, whatever you are really dreaming of, equal rights and equality, definitely that will exist in future, sir, in India.
Absolutely.
Thank you for such a wonderful quote, and thank you for saying that first and foremost thing is be a best human being.
Exactly.
And this is what I was also conveyed by my parents. You made me to